At this time, it is my pleasure to begin today's event, Lead and Succeed in 4 Dimensions. I would now like to introduce your moderator for today, and that is Christina Cleveland, Senior Director, Talent Development Solutions at Canadian Management Center. She has experience leading global project teams through complex leadership development implementations and partners with CMC clients to consult through the analysis and development of their leadership strategies. She has worked alongside our guest speaker today, Bob Wiley from One Smart World, to integrate 4DI thinking styles portfolio into the solutions we create for our clients. Christina, I'll hand the floor over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Jess. Hello, everyone, and welcome to you. We're very excited to welcome over 800 participants today from across the country and actually around the world. So welcome to our session on high-performance leadership, Lead and Succeed in 4 Dimensions. As Jess mentioned, my name is Christina Cleveland, and I will be moderating the session for you today. And for those of you who are regulars with us and attend our webinar series, welcome back to you. For those of you, if this is your first time participating with Canadian Management Center, just to provide you some insight into who CMC is, we are a professional skills organization that is focused on developing the next generation of leaders through our talent transformation solutions that we deliver. We do deliver open enrollment programs across Canada and also deliver customized on-site solutions in partnership with our clients. We're very pleased to be able to deliver webinars to you and to our clients on various topics ranging from leadership to communications and interpersonal skills, as well as a variety of other professional development skills. Today we are going to be tweeting during our live event, so you are welcome to join the conversation by using our hashtag CMC events. And you can follow us on Twitter. You can see our name listed there, and we also have the name listed for One Smart World, so you are welcome to follow us and, again, join us in a live conversation. As Jess mentioned, we are going to be inviting questions from you throughout the session, so there is a Q&A panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll do our best to get to as many questions as we can today, so feel free to use that to communicate with me, and I'll be happy to pass your questions through to Bob Wheely, our speaker today. After the session, you will have access to an email that will give you a live recording of the webinar, which will also give you access to view a copy of the slides. So if you are interested in getting a copy of the deck, you will receive that within approximately 48 to 72 hours post-session. And you are welcome to also forward that link with any of your colleagues as well if they weren't able to join us today. We mentioned that we are delivering this webinar in partnership with One Smart World. And Canadian Management Center began our partnership with One Smart World in 2011 after I had the pleasure of meeting Bob and finding out more about their all-in-one platform, which really equips leaders and professionals for 21st century thinking. It is an easy-to-use system that we are going to be talking a bit about today, but we will be focusing on the application to leadership development, but also to collaboration, problem-solving, and how you can improve your productivity and efficiency. I'm very excited to introduce you to Bob Wheely, who is here with me and will be participating live in the session today. Words that describe Bob: passionate, inspiring, creative, and a relentless innovator, actually, is a term that's been used to describe him. He is the president and founder of One Smart World, and Bob works with his team to tap into the unrealized potential in professionals and leaders today. In partnership with CMC, we do work together to help organizations transform their talent by thinking better and working smarter together. So we're very excited to welcome Bob here today, especially since he will be on a flight to Qatar once we wrap up our session today. So Bob, thanks so much for making time for us.
Thanks, Christina. Thank you for inviting us, and delighted to be here. It's snowing outside, but it is the first day of spring, so it's a good day to open our minds up and hopefully entertain some new thoughts and some new ideas. So I'm delighted to be here, and thanks to all the folks out there who've taken some time out of their busy day. And we're going to be covering a lot of stuff in a short period of time, and I've got words and pictures. So for the left brains and the right brains, we've got images as well as some text. Just to put things in context, if you think of how things are out there right now, we're living in what I call an VUCA world. The VUCA came out of the U.S. military, and I put the accelerator on the front end of things. Things are moving very, very quickly. There's a lot of volatility and uncertainty, and therefore those of us who have leadership positions, whether we're self-selected or in leadership positions in a hierarchy in an organization, have a responsibility to kind of how do we rise above this stuff and continue to move things forward in a way that makes sense to ourselves and to the people that we work with. So in today, what I'm hoping to do is give you some practical tools and techniques that you can use right away. Things you can, once the webinar is over, you can turn around to your colleagues and work, try some of this stuff right away, and also be able to use it at home. The benefits of the workshop are really to give you opportunities to increase your own engagement by working in 4 dimensions of your talent. We'll talk a little bit about that in a few minutes. And also to find ways of tapping into the talent of the people that you work with. At the end of the day, we have to do things better, we have to do things faster, we have to do them smarter, and we have to do them with others. And so leadership is an inside game as well as an outside game. We're going to focus today more on some of the inner techniques of leadership. I've done a lot of work in sports psychology over the last several decades, and you can see from my photograph I've got a lot of wrinkles. So I've been there, done that. So we're going to share some of the things that maybe you haven't heard before in terms of leadership. One of the things we found in our work is that organizations and leaders have to compete from the neck up. It's the new skills of the 21st century are how well you can think, how well you can problem solve, and how well you can collaborate with others. And what we were looking for is, can we find the tools to help leaders do that kind of thing? In the 20th century, it was about personality and knowledge. In the 21st century, it's much more around personal spirit. And we know that highly effective people think differently, they operate differently, they have different disciplines that they use, and these are all learnable skills. This is not a matter of genetics, these are all learnable skills. So that's one of the good news things you'll hear today. If you look at organizations these days, you've got a lot of smart people, a lot of dumb meetings, a lot of smart people often pulling in different directions. And leaders are looking for solutions that give them tools and a language they can use to get all these folks pulling in the right direction. So how do you move from cross purposes to common purpose? How do you move from friction to acceleration? So one of the things we need to do is to find ways of getting to those business results by, first of all, developing our people, including ourselves, and then engaging people collaboratively. One of the things we'll be talking about today is how do you take differences of talent and harmonize that to bring them to bear so you can get those results in a better, faster way. One of our clients at WestJet used our meeting solution to engage their people to generate a 558% return on their investment just by getting on the same page. And so we'll talk a little bit about that as we go forward.
So, Bob, I know we are going to open up a poll to actually get some engagement from the audience, but I just want to hang on to one of the things that you said, which is that people are faced with the responsibility now of working better, smarter, and with others, right? So it's that with others component that starts to get a little bit challenging in some circumstances because I may be able to improve my game, I may be able to get results on my own, but when I need to work with other people, sometimes I can get into a bit of a challenge, right?
Absolutely. And if you recognize that all of us think differently, and we think at different paces, that's where a lot of the conflict happens.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So we are going to open up a poll now and actually find out from you what type of thinking is valued most in your workplace. So Jess is opening up the poll on the right-hand side of your screen, and you've got the question there about what type of thinking is valued most in your workplace. So there's 4 different options that are posted for you: decisive and fast, analytical and systematic, people-centered and compassionate, or creative, so generating different ideas and options. So we're going to leave the poll open for about another 30 seconds. And again, we're asking what type of thinking is valued most in your workplace. So again, coming back to your point, Bob, that when it comes down to how each of us think and how we then apply that thinking style in our work environment, that can sometimes be where conflict happens, where things may slow down, where efficiency starts to decrease or not be as effective as we'd like it to be. So I do see the results coming in right now. We've got quite a bit of a focus on analytical and systematic as coming out as the lead front runner right now with about 41% of our audience indicating that. So we are going to close out the poll so that we can get the final results. So do hurry and get your responses in there. So priority there on analytical and systematic, Bob, and second runner-up there, creative, generating ideas and options.
And what percent there?
21%.
Okay. Well, one of the things we're finding these days is that in the old workplace, you were paid for what you knew, and now you're paid for how well you can move on the fly. The amount of non-routine tasks is accelerating, so you have to be able to work in the moment. So for organizations that are more systematic and analytical, that means slow down, make sure we got everything right. Organizations that are more creative value ideas. So if you take a look at what's going on out there, NASA, National Aeronautical and Space Administration, and the Research Institute of America asked the question, what percent of problems and errors in the workplace are due to poor quality thinking? And they both came up with the same number. The number was 94%. So it's not equipment failure. Things fail because we don't think things through very well. And if you look at the example of a couple of companies here, Blockbuster and Kodak, Blockbuster was blindsided by Netflix, and Netflix came to Blockbuster and said, we'd like you to work with us in financing our business model, and they were told to get lost. And Kodak was the same thing. When the digital camera came along and when the smartphones came along, it really put them out of business. So this wasn't a technology issue. It was a lack of quality thinking. And so thinking is a core competency for the 21st century organization and for the 21st century leader.
So Bob, does that tie back into needing to have more creative thinking within your workplace in terms of generating ideas and options?
Yeah, I would say the more you can do all four of those things we looked at. You need to be able to make decisions, but they need to be based on good information from the analysis and systematization. It needs to be based on connecting with people, but it also needs to be based on a wide variety of options and ideas. You put those four together, you've got a dynamite combination.
And what if you put those four together in a leadership context? So you have a leader who may be able to do one of those things really well but isn't as strong in other areas. I'm just going to post back up what our options were again just for reference. So you may just say you've got a leader who's a decisive and fast thinker.
Well, to me, the leader's job is much more to tap into the talent around them. Because what the leader will have is a variety of thinking styles, and if they can understand that and then say, I can go to you for this and I can go to her for that, then you've got a really dynamic team that's using all its talent. So if I was to give advice to leaders today, if you can become a four-dimensional leader and master these things, even though you like one or the other more, then you're going to be much more effective. And if you can get that four-dimensional team going, it's amazing how much you can get done.
Okay, great.
So when we looked at where do leaders go wrong, and the Blockbuster and Kodak examples are good ones. The first one is a closed mind. I don't know if you ever worked with people who have a closed mind. These are people who just aren't interested in anything, and that's kind of a death knell for leadership. One of the things we've also found is that another mind trap is overconfidence, where people just think they know, and they don't stop and go back into that analytical mode and say, well, if we just gather a little bit more information, we move to conclusions too quickly. One of our colleagues had a boss that she called the Mervinator, and the Mervinator was a guy who lived in the spinning wheels area. You would come to him with an idea, and he would look at you in his gray suit and his gray hair and say, that's really interesting. I think we should raise that again in 9 months at our next annual meeting, and after that maybe put a plan in place to do a feasibility study. And what he did was make sure that nothing happened. So beware, if you're a leader, make sure your mind stays open. Take a deep breath when someone comes to you with an idea and see what they have to offer. Just don't jump to your conclusion that you think you've already got it right. And around diving in, sometimes you need to step back before you dive in. Getting to the crux is a critical leadership skill.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think coming back to the fact that it's a critical leadership skill, it might not always be natural for a leader who is forced to get results, right? So it's all about getting results, so that decisive and fast thinking may be where some leaders live because that's what they're required to do. But it's, as you said, it takes practice to step back, maintain an open mind, make sure that we are listening to the perspective of others and tapping into that potential, right?
Absolutely, absolutely. So when things go wrong, we make mistakes. And the critical thing about leadership these days is that we're going to make mistakes, and we're going to make a lot of mistakes. And the thing is to learn from that. We're working with an organization right now that's launching an airline in 13 weeks. And they have an extraordinary amount of decisions to make in a very short period of time. And the leadership team knows that these are complex and that things are going to not go right the first time. And it's the ability to self-correct really quickly and react and respond to that. So the smart leader says, okay, I will make mistakes as opposed to hiding in the weeds, but it's how I respond and react to that. So this slide I found, for those of you who are the analytical and systematic kind of people, I found this slide really interesting. This was a research study done on, and it's been replicated in a number of different fields. It looked at kids who are learning how to play the piano. And it looked at the impact that if I really see myself as being a pianist, and I put in exactly the same amount of practice time as someone who's just only there for the short term, I just need to get through this assignment, my performance is a 300% difference. And so for people in leadership positions, if you really believe you belong as a leader, and if you're 30 years old or 25 years old or whatever age you are, and say, this is who I am and where I want to go, the impact of that belief on your performance in dealing with those oopses, because we all make mistakes, we all fail, is a critical key success factor. So if part of what leadership is an inner game, one of the key elements is to say, I really belong here. I really believe I have this role to play. I don't have it right yet, but my whole focus is on how can I get better. And I can put in the same amount of time with someone who doesn't believe that, and I can be way ahead of the game. But it's all about working on your game.
Well, and I like that statement, that how can I get better? So constantly asking ourselves that question. And we've got a few questions coming in on the Q&A panel, so I do want to remind people that that's available to you on the right-hand side of your screen. But one of the questions that's come in, Bob, is just about emotional intelligence, right? And the idea that emotional intelligence really is about self-awareness. Mm-hmm. How does what we're talking about link into self-awareness?
That's great. Well, we call our stuff, our work, total intelligence. So it's got a series of thinking skills, a series of emotional skills, and what we call personal spirit or grit. So under that same rubric or same umbrella, we have the mind, the heart, and the spirit. And we'll be showing some of that a little bit later in some of the slides, Christina. So when I say thinking, I'm encompassing the cognitive as well as the emotional, and we'll split that out in a slide a little bit later on.
Okay.
But that's a helpful question. Yeah.
I just want to restate that then for the group. I know we'll cover it, but total intelligence is thinking, emotional, and then personal spirit.
Yeah. So it's mind, heart, and spirit. Yeah, into one system.
Okay.
Yeah. Because as leaders, I don't know if anybody watched. Remember when Felix Baumgartner leapt out of that capsule way up in the sky, you know, the longest jump in history and the fastest. I mean, to some extent, he was jumping for all of us. I think in organizations today, given the VUCA world that we live in, we have to have the mind, heart, and spirit intelligence to be able to be extremely really well planful, but have the courage and discipline to make it happen. And I thought that as a kind of a metaphor for many of us in the workplace today. As things move forward, you have to take those jumps. You have to take those risks. Now, if you look at great leaders versus poor leaders, what this slide is trying to show you is that on the left-hand side, great leaders multiply talent. You know, they take people and they make them better. On the right-hand side, they crush the spirit, they crush talent, and the best people will lead those kinds of organizations. So as you look at yourself, you know, ask yourself, are people coming to me because they want to work with me? Am I building a climate in my organization and in my team where people feel really good? We're going to talk about positive spirit in a second. And am I maximizing the talents as opposed to trying to make everyone just like me? Good leaders recognize that differences are critical. So if you look at the challenge for us is how do we develop a resilient mind? Well, one of the good news out of the field of what's called neuroplasticity, which basically is a very big word for saying until about 1995, we all thought our brains were hardwired by the time we were 12. And, you know, and your grade 5 teacher made sure you knew that. You know, Johnny, this is only how far you can go. And we now know that's a crock, that we now know that the mind, the brain can adapt and grow over time with experience and with deliberate practice. So for those of us in organizations or those of us in our personal lives, we recognize by doing different things, those neurons that fire together wire together. So the more we do things in a deliberate, disciplined way, the better we can be. And for many of us as leaders, we have to jump over. We have to change our game. We have to go forwards over the bar or backwards over the bar. But the more we do it, the better we get at it, the more it reinforces those habits. So there's a woman called Carol Dweck who's looked at this and seen it from the point of view of kids in school as well as people in the workplace. And some of us come into life thinking that we are the way we are, and therefore what we do is we don't try a lot of things because we want to make sure we don't fail. And as a result, when things get tough, we give up too quickly, and as a result, we settle for much less than we could be. What she's found is that if you take the growth mindset, and picking up your point, Christina, about getting better, if I just say, I'm here to get better, I don't have it right yet, I'm always trying to get better, and you look at the great athletes out there who will go and hit the same shot 600 times, you know, if I'm always trying to get better, then I will engage in challenges and I will put in the effort. I won't feel badly about failing. I'll see that as a way of moving forward and learning. So for those of us in the leadership role, you want to create an environment in your team that has a growth mindset to it. Now, clearly, Christina's having a hard time here.
I know. I'm just getting over a cold.
I think she was back from Florida. She's having a hard time adjusting to the cold weather here.
I am. But I'm also curious to know, Bob, for new leaders that are starting out, so new leaders who are transitioning into management responsibilities, supervisory responsibilities, they're being entrusted now to lead and develop others, and they've got that second bullet, look good, not fail. So there's a great expectation that's placed on leaders. What happens to them when it comes to this mindset?
Well, this is a really critical, like a starting point, just to say to the team members that they're there, I'm in a learning mode, because the best leaders are learners. We know that from top of the line right out the door. So yes, I've got to look good, but we're all here to get better. So things are going to happen. We'll make mistakes, and we'll learn from those mistakes to get better, and we'll use that in a very conscious way, in a very deliberate way, as opposed to pointing fingers.
Well, and the way you position that, it really isn't just about new leaders then, it's about all leaders at all levels.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I'm going to pick on, I picked two little inner games here, one of which I think was one of the most mind-blowing things I've come across in the last few years. The first one is positivity. The second one is mindful micro moments, little things that you can do on a daily basis. So if you want to take a look at the next slide, a fellow called Marcel Losada looked at 60 management teams when they were doing their strategic planning. And these are companies and organizations. And he was working for the Center for Advanced Research in Michigan when he was doing his work. And what he found was a 5-to-1 ratio was the defining factor. So if you look at this little slide here, for some of you who are maybe just haven't had your second coffee yet, when you come in the morning, you can put your plug into the top plug or your power cord in the top or the bottom. The top one is where the smile is, where the energy is. The bottom one is around fear of failure and needing to look good all the time. What Losada found in his work was that when you look at teams in terms of their profitability, in terms of their customer satisfaction, and in terms of their reputation in the community, the single defining factor between high-performing teams and other organizations was the 5-to-1 positivity ratio, which means when they spoke with each other, they spoke with each other with respect, with affection, seeking clarity. And what he found also was that these teams, when they had disagreements, they would find the root cause of the disagreement as opposed to shutting down or using negative verbal or nonverbal statements. And those members would ask as many questions as they would take a stand. And they were as interested in the other person's success as they were in their own. The bottom left-hand corner, organizations there had a consistently negative pattern in their communication. They continually focused on, well, you don't understand, my department is different than your department. And they also continued to advocate their position as opposed to find that common ground. What this said to me was, if you're a leader, if you can't change the conversation to a constructive tone, you'll never get out of the starting gates. This is, to me, and Drucker said, culture eats strategy for breakfast. Well, this is all about culture. This is all about changing the way people speak with each other. And if you look at this is small stuff. It's small incremental changes. So on the next slide, what you see is something we call micro moments. The psychologists say we have between 20 and 30,000 micro moments every day. Every moment we make choices to decide something. And in a micro moment, the more you can focus on being in the process as opposed to the outcome and being present with people, this is a way you can choose to be smarter. So if you look at the impact on engagement, that one of the ways I can be smarter is by stopping, looking you in the eye, and three simple techniques. Look at someone in the eye, smile, which makes a connection, then ask an open-ended question. So after this webinar is over, when you walk out of your cubicle and you're walking down the hall and someone's coming towards you, instead of looking at your smartphone, take a deep breath, look them right in the eye, smile, which is a connector, and say, how's it going today? And you engage people. You make those choices every single day, every single moment. And as a leader, people feed off you. And if you're coming in with a positive attitude, a positive outlook, and are serious about engaging people, that's where you can really make a difference.
Well, and some of the research that we've initiated on employee engagement also, Bob, has just indicated that employees want to be involved. They want to be asked for their input. They want to be involved in planning. They want to be asked for their ideas and their suggestions. So you're paying these individuals to show up into your organization every day, but we're not tapping into that potential, right?
Absolutely. I mean, what's a really important forward management question? What do you think? You know, as opposed to being the know-it-all. Remember that overconfidence mind trap? The more you can ask people, what do you think? You know, do you have any ideas on this? How do you feel about this? Those are ways to not only engage people emotionally, but also intellectually, because people have all kinds of things they want to offer. We used to ask the question, Christina, in some of the work we did, to what extent do you have an opportunity to use your brain power while you're at work? And we were getting back about 25 to 30%. Now, most organizations spend most of their money on their people, and if your primary asset is saying, I'm working at a 30% capability, that is a tragic management challenge. That's a leader's challenge. It's not a people challenge. We have smart people out in the workplace today. You know, a lot of your engagement research is saying they're not engaged nearly the way they like to be, and part of what you're saying is looking people in the eye and seriously asking them what they think, how they feel, what some of their ideas are, what some of their recommendations would be, and then listening to them, not coming up with defensive reactions.
Right.
Some of the research, if you look at mindfulness is getting a lot of attention right now. It's on the cover of the Scientific American, current issue of Scientific American Mind. There's a lot of research coming out of Harvard on the impact of mindfulness. And for leaders, what this means is, in the AVUCA world, can we find a way to kind of slow things down? And if you can find a way to slow things down and take those deep breaths, you'll increase your self-awareness and your self-control. You'll open up. Barbara Fredrickson talks about broadening our compassion for other people. And when you do that, it's a way of engaging them. You reduce fear, and at the same time, you're increasing your resilience just by slowing down. You know, you can just go into the washroom, take 2 minutes, take a couple of deep breaths, refresh, and come out again, and you feel great. You know, just reconnecting and letting all that busyness kind of drop away.
And what does fear do to us in the workplace, Bob?
Well, fear basically closes us down. You know, fear basically closes us down so we don't see what's going on around us. We get out of touch with our feelings, because they overwhelm us, and we don't bring our best game at all. I mean, if there's been a significant shift in the management paradigm over the last decade, it's a shift from instilling fear, which is a lot of, the literature and, the leaders we look to, saying it doesn't really it doesn't have an impact. Very short-term impact. It gets compliance, but it does not get any kind of optimal return.
Right.
So I think a critical job of leaders, particularly young leaders, is to find out what you got going on around you, bring out that positive climate, and make people feel comfortable. Because as soon as you feel comfortable, you start saying things that might make a difference, might make an impact.
Right. And so we have a question coming in about what do you do if you work in an environment where that is not created for you. So you may want to create that type of environment for your people, but your leader may not be modeling those same behaviors for you.
I would say there's two things you can do. One is, go on to Workopolis and look for another place. Because that's serious. If you're a young person in a negative environment, you're not going to turn it around. Bad organizations beat good people all the time. If it's somewhere where you want to work and it's only that leader, I think you can create those micro moments for yourself that over time can make a real difference. You do a couple of things in the morning, a couple of things in the afternoon that create that sense of control over your environment. You can make that difference. But these are critical choices for you, because if you have a long career ahead of you, you have to make some decisions around, is this really where I want to be, where I can bring my best? Because if you can't, it'll kill your spirit.
But it's possible to still model those behaviors, create the environment that may enable your people, and you're still achieving results. You may capture the attention of those who you are reporting into who may not be modeling that behavior. They may be wondering what you're doing differently.
Absolutely. You can create those, like a microclimate in your team to say, okay, all this stuff out there isn't working the way we'd like to work it, but we can do some things ourselves. These are some things where we can make a difference and make it better for ourselves. Now we're going to switch gears now into and some of the information we wanted to share with you around the 4 dimensions. What we're finding, of course, and this is a great Goldman Sachs side, I really like it, the good news is that great minds don't think alike, because when they all think alike, we're in trouble. So diversity in the workplace is a critical factor that we need to pay attention to. What we find is there are 3 layers to diversity. The first one is the one we've paid attention to for the last 20 years, the demographic diversity. The gender, the race, the culture, the abilities, sexual orientation, all that kind of stuff that is visible to us. A second level of diversity is knowledge and skill. So you've got manufacturing people sitting with HR people, sitting with administration people. We all know different stuff. And so when we come to the table, we look at it through different lens. The third level, which is where we've been working at for a while now, is cognitive style diversity. Not only do we look different from each other, we come from different places, but we also think differently. We were working with a client down in Texas last year, a senior executive in a school board. She was an African-American woman in her early 50s, and she was the only African-American in the senior team, and she was the only African-American woman in the senior team. And she said, for the first time in my career, I'm being seen as a critical thinker, as opposed to a woman or an African-American woman. She says, this is what I really bring to the dance. I'm a really good critical thinker. So in our organizations today, we have a wide variety of diversity in terms of demographic stuff, but it's all about how do you get people thinking and working together better, because that's where the commonality comes in.
Okay.
So this is our second poll.
So we did want to ask this. It's the same question, but asked a little differently, right, Bob? Because before we asked about what type of thinking was valued in your workplace, and now we're asking what type of thinking you like to do most. So we are going to be opening the poll again on the right-hand side of your screen and asking what type of thinking you like to do the most. And this answer could very well be different than what type of thinking may be valued within your organization. It doesn't necessarily mean that you don't add value to your organization, but the culture within the organization tends to sort of dictate or drive what type of thinking may be valued. But we all have something to contribute. So I'm actually going to click in my response also in terms of what type of thinking I like to do. And could it change, Bob? Could the type of thinking you want to do or you like to do change in your personal life versus your professional life? Absolutely.
One of the things we found with the emphasis on personality tools like Myers-Briggs over the last 40 years, 50 years really, the premise there was that we are relatively hardwired. This is how we are. It's hard to change your personality unless, in my case, you have a lobotomy or a conversion, but you can always change your thinking. And these are all adaptable styles. So what we find is I might prefer one over another, but I can learn and acquire all these things, and I can bring out the best of these talents in my team as well. So these are learnable skills. So the four-dimensional leader is someone who can master these dimensions here.
Okay, and our responses are closing out. It looks like we've got 38% of our audience that like to do creative thinking. And second response there in terms is analytical and systematic. Looks like 35%. So same groups that we were using before.
A little bit of a flip. I was at a program about a year ago, and we use an instrument called the 40i, and you'll see it in one of the upcoming slides here. And this is a senior person. When she looked at her profile, she said, I'm in the wrong job, burst into tears, and went into the washer. A highly skillful manager who is very decisive in her way of operating was in a job that required her to be analytical and systematic. She could do it, but she didn't like it. And she was, as you'll see in a second, she was like a yellow peg in a red hole. So we'll talk a little bit about that. So what we found in our work is that there's a new way of looking at smarts in the 21st century. It's not so much how much you know and your experience. It's that plus how well you can think, how well you can problem solve, self-manage, communicate, and collaborate. So what we've done is build basically a platform for doing that, for not only building skills, but accelerating collaborative teamwork. So I was looking for a simple way to convey this, a mnemonic device that could model in organizations. And this is something you can, all of you listening can use right when we're finished. You can use this right away. It's a very simple mnemonic device. We took a metaphor of a traffic light, and if you think of people in traffic, you could be driving a Lada or a Lamborghini, but if the light goes red and we all stop, we're fine. But if two people accelerate, two people slow down, and everyone else stops, we have traffic. Remember those cross doors we saw on that other slide? Well, what we did is we took that mnemonic device and we assigned different types of thinking. And this came out of the work of Robert Sternberg, who looked at 3 major types of thinking. Another fellow called Jerry Rhodes, same type of work. And we said, what if we could take colors like red is stop and decide. That's the decisive element. Yellow is to slow down, understand, which is gathering information, the analytical side and compassionate side. Or green, which is 38% of our audience here, is go and create. Now, the challenge is, am I a green peg in a yellow hole? Am I a yellow peg in a red hole? Is there a fit between how I like to operate? And good leaders say, we're going to create an environment where we can bring out the best in people. So what we built is a common language for understanding people, but also accelerating collaboration. So what this common language does is help different people get on the same page. So going back to your workplace today, using a traffic light saying red is for decision making, yellow is for slowing down, gathering information, connecting with each other, green is for going and creating. How many people here would operate in any one of those zones? Now, how can we find a common way to work together? So we'll talk about that as we go through this. So what I wanted to do was build like a next generation psychometric that could connect not only to understanding people, but also getting work done and off a single platform. So the first element was the 4DI, or 4 dimensions inventory. And we talked about what the 4 dimensions are. They're basically decision making, understanding, which has 2 components, analytical thinking and compassion, creativity, and personal spirit. So the online instrument that we work with CMC on is called the 4DI. You have access 24/7. You get your results right away. And it gives you the preferences you have for using specific thinking strategies. What's cool about this is that we've had a number of school systems across the country adopt this now because they realize that instead of just teaching subjects, kids have to learn how to think, collaborate, and problem solve, much like we do in any kind of organization. But they're not learning those skills. They're still learning subjects. So if you look at the model from the 2 poles, we've got a left brain and a right brain. This is where the emotional intelligence question comes back in. What we found was on the left side, we use our thinking to our critical thinking that would help us say, is this the right thing? Can you prove this to me? Because I have to make sure this is the right decision. The analytical thinking is gathering the data, organizing it, and being systematic, really drilling down. And the creative thinking is the ideas, options, and alternatives. On the right-hand side, on the emotional side, our emotions help us make decisions. Think of the decisions you make. I worked with a group recently. There were 2 women. They were talking about buying a car. And one woman said she was extremely high in the yellow zone, analytical thinking. She said, I did 3 months of research on buying a car. The woman beside her said, see this purse? I walked into a dealer and said, I want to buy a car that matches this purse. Do you have a car color that matches this purse? And the guy looked at her and said, are you serious? Mm-hmm. How about this one? I'll take it. And the woman beside her was shocked. 2 totally different ways of making decisions. One very much in the moment, gut instinct. The other one very analytical. Same issue, buying a car, very different approaches. So on the emotional intelligence side, we make decisions with our gut. We make decisions through our compassion. We connect with people through compassion. We also have those aha moments. You're in the shower, you're walking to the car, you get that click. So here's where the thinking and feeling comes into place.
And so I've just put a question into the chat panel. So different from the Q&A is whether or not you tend to think with your left brain or right brain. And I know that we asked about what type of thinking you like to do. So feel free to answer or submit a response into the chat panel about whether or not you tend to think with your left brain or your right brain. And one of the things I find interesting about our thinking styles, Bob, is that even though I may prefer to do one type of thinking, I generally may reflect on how somebody else may approach a similar situation and sort of wish that I could be more creative. So I'm definitely not into creating, generating options, but I look at people who are amazing brainstormers, can come up with these flashes of insight, great ideas, and I'm sort of in awe of their capability within that area, but because it's not my strength at all.
No, and as a good leader, Christina, I mean, that's the key. If I can look around my team and say, I don't have to do all this, the more I can expand my capabilities, the better, but the more I can access the talent in my team and say, if I can't do this, I know you can. All I need to do is ask good questions. Good leaders ask more questions than they give answers. If I can ask those questions to say, does anyone have any ideas or alternatives around this that we could explore? That's bringing out the green in the group. So it's not about personality here. These are things that we can shift into and in and out of as a leader, either by doing it directly or by asking questions that bring that out in a team member.
So that big question you said before, right? What do you think?
What do you think? Yeah. Because what we look at is not only what do you think, but how you think is critical. And these are like gears. You can shift gears here, across the spectrum.
Okay. We've got some commentary coming in. So it looks like we've got a good balance here. Some people saying definitely left brain thinkers. Some people saying right brain. Sometimes people indicating that they pay attention to one side of their brain, ignoring the other side of their brain, which may tend to be right, the right way to approach something. But definitely some diversity within our audience listening now.
And because there's diversity in the audience, there's diversity in the workplace. So the leader has to be aware of that people approach things differently. And the more I can appreciate where you're coming from and then tap into that, and then also help you appreciate there's other ways of doing things as well and help you develop that set of skills the better.
Yeah. Well, and someone commented, I usually use my left brain for thinking because I'm not confident in my right brain decisions. So if you're not feeling confident in your right brain decisions, is it possible that you might be working in an environment where that type of thinking may not be valued, or it could be that you're in a situation where you can't back it up with evidence?
Well, I would say if you do both, you're way ahead of the game. In other words, if you can say, what does my gut tell me, or what do my values tell me, and does it make sense? So as a leader, when you're getting into the red zone to make decisions in a meeting, so you can use this as a language for meetings as well. You can say, we're going to start off in yellow sharing facts, and then we're going to generate some options, and then we're going to make a decision. So at that point in time, you can go around the table to say, okay, what does our head tell us? What makes the most sense here in terms of the criteria that we've got? And at the same time is, what does your gut tell you? Because that's a whole different thing. Does it fit our gut? Does it fit what our gut is saying? I was working with a group that at the Sky Dome one time, and they made a decision at the end of the meeting, and one of the guys said, well, what's our gut telling us? And one of the guys who was very quiet said, I think we've made a terrible mistake here. Logically, it makes sense. I think it's going to upset people, and the way we're doing it is going to cause more trouble than it's worth. And that reopened the whole discussion. Well, so what are you feeling about this? And his ability to express that forced them to rethink where they were going and change the direction. So the more you can use both of those things. So it's one versus the other. It's not emotional intelligence versus thinking. It's bringing those things together.
Right.
So if you look at the 4DI instrument is a very sophisticated online and print tool, but what it shows you is how you like to think, and you can do this with an individual. You can also get a team profile. One of our clients on Monday was working with a new team, an executive team, and they used the team profile to say, this is where we're really strong, but we're low here, and we're going to have to really be careful because we're not paying enough attention to that stuff, and when the decisions hit, we really need to think these through better. So on the right-hand side, you can see the 3 red bars. One is for critical thinking, the lighter color. The other 2 are for values-driven and gut instinct. So again, in the decision-making, does this make sense? Does it fit our values? And what's our gut tell us? Then you've got all things covered. When we did this research, we didn't realize that there are 3 ways that people make decisions. And so that's how we've organized this information.
And so in the research that you have done, is there one style of thinking that tends to be more predominant in those who have completed the profile to date?
Absolutely. We've got data on over 100,000 people, and what we're finding in Canada in particular is an increase in the yellow zone and a decrease in the green zone. And if you look at our Canadian economy, we're falling off the index in terms of innovation. Innovation starts with green, but it gets executed in yellow and red. So we find schools in particular emphasize, rote learning, memory, and understanding. And yet we need that diversity of thinking. So one is not better than another if an organization has that diversity. Right. But what we found is that the analytical thinking is the one that's continuing to creep up there. Red is about the same, and green is going down.
Okay, so I just wanted to draw us back to that visual. So, so in Canada, we're seeing an increase in yellow, so that's analytical thinking and, from a warm heart perspective, compassion, but a decrease in creative thinking and creative intuition. Okay?
Yeah. So what you have in organizations, Christina, is a lot of really smart people sitting around a table. But the reality is they all think differently. And the leader's job at the head of the table there is to say, how can I get people onto the same page, and how can I get them working more effectively together? Because if you look at the next slide, what you'll see is that same group of people, when you do something like this, we have very, very different thinking styles. And so people who are high in red tend to be impatient. They want to get things done. They just want things to get done. Even if they don't have to get them done, they just want to get the closure. People who are high in yellow are slowing down, trying to understand things, gathering more information, asking how people are feeling. And, and the person who's high in green is sitting there either frustrated or saying, I've got ideas, but no one's giving me the airspace.
Okay. So linking these colors and styles, again, just back to the 4 options that we gave to our audience earlier with the poll. So we had fast and decisive, so that would be a red thinker, correct? And then we had generating ideas and options, that would be a green thinker. People-centered thinking would be a warm yellow.
That's correct, yeah, warm heart, yeah.
Warm heart. And then we've got those who may be systematic and analytical would be a yellow thinker as well, right? So you think reds are impatient would be a characteristic we might align?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's an element. Remember we talked about moving to closure. They want to move closure. Let's get her done. There's a new book out coming by the Heath brothers, who are really cool guys. They've written a book called Switch and Made to Stick, and it's on decision making. And what they're finding is executives will often jump on the first option, and that's a kiss of death. So when we use our stuff in groups, as you know, we first of all will profile a group, but then we'll use this as a process language. So if you're chairing the meeting, you can say, before we get to red, let's take a look at the information we have. Let's take a look at what the critical issue is, the crux in red. Let's take a look at our options and make sure we got more than one, and then we can move to making a decision, and do that in a way that respects the differences around the table. So it's used as like a lean meeting management process language that taps into the talents of all of the team.
And again, that key question that you mentioned earlier, what do you think, is the question that you need to ask in order to tap into that different type of thinking that is around the table in your meetings, in your group discussions, in one-on-one conversations with your employees.
Absolutely.
What do you think?
Yes, and so as a leader, what you need to do is to find a way to get your team aligned. So when a team is getting together, regardless of our styles, if it's decision-making time, then we're all pulling on decision-making. I was working with a client not so long ago, and we were in the green zone for 8 minutes. And there was this one guy, his name was Mike, who would paralyze the discussion because he would ask really long questions. And so we're in the green zone, and we weren't into it 2 minutes. That's a really interesting comment, Howard. Have you seen? It was like, stop. He would have gobbled up the 8 minutes with his yellow comment. We said, can you just hold that? We need to generate ideas. And in this case, now we're all pulling for closure. So we're trying to find the right way to go. We're not looking at any more information. So the leader's job is, how do I align the total intelligence of my team by having a simple common language like a traffic light? And we've had clients just hear this presentation and use it right away, because people get a traffic light. Red zone, we argue and debate. Yellow zone, we seek to understand and learn and listen and tap into our feelings. Green zone is about lots of ideas. And then the white personal spirit is, who's going to take initiative and make this happen.
Okay. Well, I've brought back up the visual of the universal common language because we've got a couple questions coming in. And one is, and I know you mentioned Myers-Briggs before, so how does this differ from Myers-Briggs?
It differs on a number of levels. One, Myers-Briggs is around personality traits. This is around thinking strategies. Myers-Briggs was based on some fantastic work done in the 60s, and there's a lot of variations on that instrument, but it's still Jung, and it's still around, this is how I am. Ours are much more about, these are discrete strategies. So each one of these colors has a set of 6 strategies that are learnable strategies. They're like precision thinking tools. So I would say, and this is also a process language. So once you've got the language, you can use it to manage meetings or manage projects. So I would say ours is like a 21st century next generation tool, and we built it because I felt that we hadn't innovated enough as an industry. We needed to shift from personality to thinking, and we needed to add in business productivity off a single platform.
And so this is not this is how I am, take it or leave it.
Absolutely not.
Situation.
No.
So this is my strength and my preference, but I'm perfectly capable of stretching myself to initiate the other types of thinking.
Yeah, and what's interesting about the brain research is that's very much aligned. That these are all learnable skills. How do you learn them? Practice, practice, practice.
Okay. So I'm just going to come back to a couple other questions actually that we've had coming in. I'm just filtering through them right now. So a question coming in is curious about how the 4DI output is achieved. So is it based on a list of multiple choice questions that people are completing? How do they complete the assessment?
Yeah. So the 4DI it takes about 15 minutes. It's an online questionnaire. There are 45 paired choices that look at your different choices in terms of red, yellow, and green strategies. And then there's a separate section, 24 self-rating questions on personal spirit. So you get your results right away. It comes in an online interactive format, and it's a 36-page PDF report as well. And it's all done in a helpful way, in the sense that here's how you responded on a percentile basis. So it's on 25,000. It was normed on 25,000 working people. So it's 15 minutes, results right away. Can build up team profiles, but it's got a built-in coach. So online you've got a coach that says, if I want to work on my game and I got something high or something low, what do I do here? So it's built in that way. Okay. But the whole assumption is that you can get better. You know, we're fine the way we are, but we can get better.
And so just in terms of being able to view a copy of the 4DI profile, there is a sample profile posted on our website, so the URL is listed here for you, so you can feel free to do that. We will send you a copy or access to the link as well when we send the follow-up email with the recording of today's session. But we do have a question coming in about leadership. So when the leader is making the decisions is read, but doesn't necessarily go to the team to ask for their opinions or thoughts, how do you get them to understand that they need to tap into the strengths of others, or the thinking of others?
Okay, that's good. So there's a couple things. One is sometimes the leader has to make a decision. So they can go forward and say, here's what the decision is. Do you understand it? That's one type of thing. Second thing is, I have to make the decision, but I would like your advice before I make that decision. So that's where the conversation happens. So we don't have to agree. You know, Lisa can say one thing, Mary can say something else, and I can say I'm just entertaining all the options. Or the leader can be very clear to say, we are going to make this decision, so we are going to have to think this through, and we're going to have to come up with some form of consensus. But to be really clear on that, so if your leader doesn't come to you and ask for input, then they are significantly underutilizing the most valuable asset in the organization. So if they can find a way to engage you and engage your colleagues, you're going to get a much better quality decision. But they have to not have a closed mind. They can't be overconfident. They have to be able to sit back and stay in the yellow zone and hear what's being said and not move to closure.
Yeah, I'm going to pull that slide back up too, Bob, because I think that that's an absolutely valid point. But I love the way you position that. There may be situations where they have to make a decision, so maybe they don't have time to tap in for input, but they could validate their thinking even afterwards, right? Or they may say, I'm going to ask you for input, and then I'm still going to have to make a decision, which they may be weighing the pros and cons of certain ideas. Or they may make it a total collaborative experience and ask for input and involvement in actually making the decision.
And I think that's a key leadership choice that anybody here who's listening has. There are some times that you have to make the call, and because of the level you're at, but there's other times you can look for advice, or there's other times you say, we need to figure this out together. And what this does is provide a process language for figuring it out together.
And so if you're in a situation where you are working with a supervisor that may have a negative attitude, so doesn't bring that collaborative spirit, may always be in the situation where they're not tapping into the potential of their people, do you have any suggestions or strategies on what people can do to help enable that or create a situation where they can manage up, so to speak?
That's a really good question. You might try something like, at our next meeting, could we try this traffic light technique? What do you mean by that? Could we spend 5 minutes in the yellow zone trying to understand what the situation is, 5 minutes in the green zone, just generating a bunch of options and ideas, and then 5 minutes in the red zone, based on that information, based on those options, what seems to be the best way to go? Just to try, don't, do things in bite-sized chunks. Let's try it for 15 minutes. We just try this little method. We'll just use the traffic light. So when we're in yellow, we're all trying to understand. When we're in green, we're generating lots of ideas. We're not criticizing. And when we're in red, we're saying, okay, based on that, what seems to be the best way to go? Yeah.
So it's just an opportunity to introduce this as a technique. So something you picked up on a webinar that you participated in, show them the visual of a traffic light, and then share them some overviews of what that process could actually look like.
And you can say that some of the smartest organizations in the country are using this system. They're looking for simple tools to help them manage through complex times.
And someone's asking if we can elaborate a little bit more on the personal spirit dimension. So we talked a little bit about decide, understand, and create, but wanting to talk a little bit more about initiate, so that fourth dimension.
Yeah, the fourth dimension is the X factor, and I'm really glad that someone asked the question. We haven't, the personal spirit was the thing that when I built the instrument with our team, this is kind of the heart of resilience. It looks at three critical behaviors. One is your outlook, your second is your sense of control, and your third is your initiative. And all of those three elements are tied into high performance. When you look at organizations that have a high personal spirit from our profile, man, no matter what you throw at them, they can get it done. When you walk into an organization with a low personal spirit, which means people's outlook is very poor, they feel victims, or they feel overwhelmed, or they feel disempowered, disengaged, therefore no one takes initiative, that's a tough thing. So personal spirit is something that can be built. We've got I've got a couple of articles on that. If anyone's interested, we can send you that article just on what it is and what it's all about. But to me, it's a critical thing. Leaders need to build. As a parent or a leader, if you can create high personal spirit in your kids and in your team, look out, because they can go and take on the world.
And coming back to engagement, that's that enablement factor, right?
If you can't have a high personal spirit in your organization unless you engage people. In engaging people, what are you engaging? You're engaging their minds, the thinking, their hearts, the emotional intelligence, and their spirit. That's what you're engaging.
So I'm going to take in one last question, Bob, because I know we've got a few more slides that you need to get through, but just coming back to the fact that we talked about the number one or more predominant style of thinking in Canada is yellow, so understanding. What do you think is the reason as to why there's a decline in green thinking in general in Canada?
I think there's a couple of things. I think one is the educational system continues to pump out people who have to meet those criteria to graduate. And I think the second thing is in some parts of our society there's a level of complacency and mediocrity, that we don't aspire high enough. There in sectors of our society in Canada we have outstanding performers, but we've always been seen to be a somewhat risk-averse country. Mm-hmm. And as a result, I think it's being reflected in these results. You need the diversity. One is not better than the other. You need them all. And somehow we need to foster climates and skunk works inside organizations where people who have ideas can be listened to. And so if you've got someone who looks a bit different in your organization and has ideas, pay attention to them. Give them the time of day.
Right. And so linking that into leadership development?
So if you look at who's coming into leadership development, you see people in different kinds of outfits. And the last thing if you are churning out people who think alike and look alike, you're toast. The diversity is a critical thing. A guy called Kevin Dunbar, who has done some really good work on team results. What he found was that if you have the right amount of diversity, that the amount of work, the revenue generated, all goes up. But the tricky thing for the leader is to say, now I know the diversity is there. How do I map it, which is what the 40I is all about? Then how do I tap it, which is what our smarter meetings processes are all about? You get that combination going of developing your people and engaging them collaboratively. It's amazing what can happen. And what Losada found was if you put the right climate in place, that positivity climate, and you use the micro moments every day that happen to continue to move in that positive trajectory, leaders can really make a difference. But a lot of leadership, I think, is small moments properly chosen that advance the organization.
And coming back to your earlier question again, it's tapping into that potential by asking, what do you think? And so how leaders become exceptional is to practice.
You got it. Practice. How do you get to Carnegie Hall? Practice. How do you get good at anything? Practice. And deliberately practice. Do it in a very deliberate, systematic way. One of the experts on competency said, beware of people talking about strengths. It's not about competency. It's about building your skills, and building your skills means often doing things that you don't like to do in order to expand your capability and doing it in a deliberate way. And if we do it right, be like Felix, we've made our leap and we've landed safely.
Okay. That's great, Bob. Thank you so much for your insights today. And I know that we've got still quite a few questions that are coming in, and we'll do our best to respond to them in the Q&A panel if we get time just after this webinar. If you do want to get access to some more information, again, you can check out our website at cncoutperform.com. There is a section dedicated to One Smart World and also to the programs that we have available. So we do have a one-day session, Lead and Succeed in 4 Dimensions, that is delivered at CNC. And that gives you a high-level overview of all of the 4 dimensions. You'll actually get an opportunity to complete your 4DI assessment and to work through some strategies about how you can tap into your 4 dimensions and tap into the potential of others. So that map it and tap it, right, Bob? So, Bob, thank you so much for taking the time out to join us today. We really appreciated having you.
Thank you.
We do welcome your feedback for those of you who are on the line still. We would love to ask you to complete our survey so that we can get some suggestions from you about what we can do better or differently next time. So coming back to practice, we want to always up our game as well. So please do take a minute to complete that survey and provide us with your feedback. We will follow up with an email that will give you access to a recording of the webinar, and again, you'll have the opportunity to view the slides through that link as well, and we'll provide you access to some of the articles that Bob was talking about, and we'll also give you access to the link that will give you the opportunity to view a sample copy of the 4DI assessment. So everyone, thank you so much again for joining our session today on high-performance leadership, Lead and Succeed in 4 Dimensions. We look forward to seeing you again online in the future.